How's it going, my comics? And we're here today with Gerald Von Stoddard, the creator of the Immortal Coil. Did I say your last name right?
Von Stoddard.
Von Stoddard. Thank you. How you doing, Jared?
There it is. I'm good.
So before we started recording, you said you just got back into comics. What was your
Yeah,
comic books before the Immortal Coil?
well, before Immortal Coil, I when I say so we'll just make it clear. We're getting back into comic creating, writing, developing. I've never been out of comics in one way or the other. I mean, comics have been my life since I was 5 years old. You know, everybody has something they're always into. We were talking about toys before,
Hmm.
or whatever it might be. For me, it was just comic books. Always been, and I'm sure I'm still going strong at my age, so it's not going anywhere. Um, I mean, I started drawing when I was 5, and uh, obviously they weren't that great at 5, but it never stopped. I just kept going, and it was always like something in my life getting better. Actually, when I was a teenager, I had the lucky, crazy uh, um, fortune of having a connection to Terry Austin. If anyone knows Terry Austin, and Terry Austin, he was a huge inker, 70s to 80s, X-Men. Um, Tons of other books. Of course, I knew who he was, and so I got to spend some time with him as a mentor when I was still in high school, and that was really awesome. And so that was always going to be a big part of my life, but kind of sort of fell into other things, traveling, music. Uh, Ended up getting into theater. Um, did that for a long time, and still stayed collecting, still drawing, but just kind of became like, unfortunately, at that point, it kind of became like a hobby, and but it was always always a passion, still a passion of mine. And then I moved to Portland, Maine, 2007. Yeah, and kind of just hooked up with all these like crazy punk rock nerds, and some people who are from New England probably heard of Newberry Comics, and we all worked there and dreamed about having our own comic shop. And for them, it was like water cooler talk. Uh, I went home and said, "No, I'm going to do it. I'm going to start a comic shop." And so I came back to work and said, "Hey guys, I'm going to start a comic shop." And they're like, "Okay." And they didn't believe me, so I bought 250,000 comic books and rented a U-Haul van and drove all over, went to shows, sold them, made some money, and said, "Hey, I think this will work." And we started Go City Comics in 2009. And so 15 years later, it's still there. I'm not the owner anymore. But there's a reason why I sort of tell that story, because actually, when you were running a shop, you know, um, wasn't just a passion of comic books. It was like, meeting other creators, going to conventions, and I'll say feeling a little jealous, like this, because it was what I really wanted to do. I mean, I loved the shop and I love meeting people, and I got to meet some really awesome people that I'm still friends with. Like we were talking about Joe Schmalke and Ben Bishop, a bunch of other people, and I started writing again, and I started drawing again. Uh, but it's funny because I've had a lot of like great reactions to my art, but I never thought it was good enough, or that it was comic booky enough. Uh, because kind of like what I mean, there were stories in art that I liked that may not would be your superhero fare. I mean, I sort of, as I got older, I mean, it was like, especially Vertigo, when Vertigo was around, those were my books. That was like those books were like made for me. The Constantine, the Sandman, Swamp Thing. It was like that dark, edgier stuff. But I was more focused on the writing. And one thing that Terry Austin told me when I was a teenager was, because he was looking at my art like the first time, giving me a critique, and I was a 15-year-old in my bedroom. And he's in my bedroom, and he's like, "I can tell you're trying to look like dot dot dot." And at that time, it was either probably Frank Miller or Klaus Johnson, who was doing Punisher at the time, Jansen. And he said, just draw and don't be like anybody else. Or if it looks like somebody, whatever, but just draw and make whatever you want to draw or make. And I wished I took that advice, but I didn't. That was a long time ago. And kind of came full circle, so many lots have happened, had kids, did some more traveling, picked up some old scripts. I was doing a lot of work for like kid stuff, kind of supernatural stuff, but more like kids, and it bombed. I mean, I am not embarrassed to say. I mean, it just never took off. Like, I never got any interest. I put out one comic book finally, and I was afraid to draw it. And the person who I'd hired to draw the book was really great to work with. But when I look back and see the art, I'm not a. It's not me. It wasn't the story. It wasn't good. It was just being afraid to like put myself out there. And then it was only recently that I was like, okay, I don't want to write kid stuff anymore. I have kids and I love them dearly, but I want to write what I want to write, and I want to do what I want to do. And even if it's a niche or it's more horror sort of based, or it is what it is. And I was just, chatting with Joe Schmalke and showed him a page. And because I told him I'm looking for an artist, and he said, "Yeah, no, that's you're gonna draw it." And I'm like, so I did 4 more pages. I showed him the first 5 pages, which are the first 5 pages of Immortal Coil, and he had great things to say, huge supporter, and he's been and so he kind of became, and he still is, a huge mentor, inspiration for me. And was only, this year, back in right before, late winters or early spring, and decided, hey, you know what? Okay, I'll draw 10 pages. I'll put it up on Kickstarter, and if no one likes it, then no big deal. Life goes on. But that's been the case. It was the exact opposite. I made a little preview, and I kind of wish things would calm down a little bit. I wasn't expecting, such a positive response, and and I was like, why did I wait so long to do this? Whatever,
What is the Immortal Coil about?
Oh man, I know everybody asks me this, and I'm always like, how do I say it in less than 15 minutes? Well, it's a story that had been in my head for a long time, because I'm a huge fan of mythology, and I've always loved Norse mythology. Even one of my kids is has a Norse name, and I am not. My ancestors are not from that region at all. But I was always just obsessed with, it's called like, the prose edda. And the prose edda is sort of where all these characters come from, sort of like, with people from that region before Christianity, this was their deities, their mythology, the explanation of the universe, and their morality tales. And everyone in those stories, it's a family. and they're all related. Like nobody's not sort of related. Like everybody's a kid of someone, and you know, and the movies and the comics don't really kind of get into that as much. Like Hela's not. They decide not to make her Loki's daughter, but she is, and that to me, that was a huge part of the story. When I started actually reading the mythology, it was like, well, that's kind of a big deal, I think. And that Loki had these three children that he was hiding from Odin and everyone. And Hel was one of them, Fenrir the wolf, and the serpent. Um, and So I just got deeper into it, just started making me think of stuff. And I've always been a huge fan, of Sandman. And not just because I love Neil Gaiman's writing, but it's just so epic. And it's also about family. I mean, Sandman is just one of the seven endless. And, if you get deeper into the story, there's their mother and father, and they are so dysfunctional. It's insane. And they are like these endless beings. And I'm just thinking, like, well, if you just take some of our own personal human dysfunction and put it on this epic scale, it's almost laughable, because it could go on for eternity.
Mhm.
Not just like, well, hey, listen, my dad's gonna die one day, and I'll just get his house. And we just go kind of move on. It's like, no, my dad's immortal, and so. But I'm also a fan of Lovecraft. I'm not an expert in any means. I just think I've always found his writing to be actually quite amazing, and especially being written in an era of when he was writing it. No one was writing like Lovecraft, not just a subject matter, but actually as a writer. I mean, it's quite deep. And he was quite skilled at it too. In the end, the fact that he gave it all away. Like it wasn't like he set a family up or a legacy. It was just like, you can all have it and just keep it going. I just think that's amazing. And so and then I love Shakespeare, and I thought, uh, what if I just combined all these elements? I just started like thinking about this story a few years ago, and then it just came to my sort of just developed. And there I started writing it down. So Immortal Coil is about um, Ragnarok being a hoax, that it didn't really happen, and that Odin and his wife Freya, and you know his children, his grandchildren, um, and there is a couple of people who are involved. I just can't say because it's huge spoilers. You have to read the series to find out that it's not just good and evil. Because in this story, that Odin's this sort of that side of the family are just as much bastards as Loki and his family. It's kind of like, what is evil? But the point is, Ragnarok was a hoax. It's thousands of years later. To create the hoax, they had to sacrifice all the other realms except Midgard, Earth, and they thought they got rid of Loki for good. That was the whole plan. They just didn't know how else to get rid of him. And so they just came up with this whole plan. But he's awake, and he finds out that Odin has a sliver of the faceless god, who is an offspring of Azazov, who is considered like the ultimate in Lovecraft lore of the elder gods. And he's gonna steal it to just destroy the whole freaking world. He's stopped lying and conniving. He's just gone plain. He's just gone straight to, I'm gonna annihilate everything. I don't care. You want to see Ragnarok? You're gonna see right. It's not gonna be Ragnarok the rebirth. It's gonna be Ragnarok nothing. So that's the plan. And Odin's only hope is to his three grandchildren, who are the offspring of Thor, are asleep inside human hosts, and it's been this way perpetually for 1,000 years. And he has to wake them up, because if he can't wake them up, then Loki will succeed. And Loki manages to wake up his daughter Hel, and more of the cast of characters kind of come in. So it's sort of like, is this it? Is this the end of everything? Or or do us as human beings stand a chance? You know, in these two worlds of omnipotent beings.
That is badass. Like, that's very cool and very, very original. All in one. Yeah, I'm excited to see what you do with this, or where this goes. How many issues do you have planned?
Six. There is a six-issue plan. Originally five, but that would be shortchanging it because the second issue I'm already writing, and the first 5 pages kind of take up a big chunk of the story because I wanted to give one flashback. It's 5 pages of flashback. I didn't want it to become like a trope, like a thing. Oh, okay, every issue, um, and I have a great editor too, and he's a huge help, and he's coming on board as a co-writer actually. A guy named Sean French. He's been an amazing editor and just a guy we go back and forth with ideas, and so I've come to really trust the guy, and I think he understands my voice and where the story's going. So hopefully 6 issues. Issue number one is, well, I'm done with my art. The colorist is about a week away from finishing, and it's off to the letterer, and the digital copy should be available in September sometime. Uh, Fingers crossed. And then by the end of September, we'll be getting all those fulfillments ready for the Kickstarter and waiting to see what the response is. The response for 5 pages was great on Kickstarter. I'm giving them 28, so let's see how they feel after, because that's a lot of what it is. I mean, people Kickstarter is kind of amazing, and a lot of people on Kickstarter who are successful usually have a property that's they're like a handful of issues in. This is an issue that wasn't even completed when funded, so it's sort of like, I mean, I'm so grateful for the support, but I also understand that, like, it might be a little like, man, this better be good. This better be a good one. I'm putting $10 towards this book. This better kick my ass. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to kick everyone's ass with the first issue. It's not a superhero book. It's I hate to even call it. You have to give these titles for it. Like, what do I call this book? Is it horror? Yeah, sure, in a way. Horror in the sense I think of the way kind of horror that I like. Just the way the pacing. Like the first issue was kind of like a slow burn. There's a lot of blood for sure, but I'm not a gory writer. Not that kind of horror. More like old school.
Okay. Um, is the Kickstarter over?
Oh yeah, it ended July 3rd. It was from June 3rd to July 3rd. Yeah,
Okay.
but we doubled the goal.
Sweet.
So that was mind blowing. Reached all the stretch goals, which is great. More work for me, but great for everybody else. No, I mean, it's just, yeah. I mean, when you've never done a Kickstarter before and you're putting out your first comic, your first Kickstarter, you're putting your art out after like not showing people for like the last 30 years. It's kind of was a big deal. It was a lot to kind of like say, okay, I'm going in. It's like when you're playing like poker and you're like, I'm just going all in, putting all my
Yeah.
chips on the table. And this is it, because I don't care. Like, I'm going to, if in whether this works or it doesn't, it's not a reflection on who we are as people. It's just something that you either love doing or you don't. And if other people love it too, then it could possibly be a career. And if they don't respond to it, then maybe your kids will love it. I don't know. But on the Kickstarter was really beyond my expectations.
That's awesome. Is there anything you want to say before we go?
Oh, yeah. Well, I just if people are just finding out about Immortal Coil and like, oh, the Kickstarter's over. Oh my god, I mean, I do have a website where the book will be available. Because some people have been asking me, especially international and overseas. I got a lot of comments from that, like Canadians, some people from Spain. I'm part time in Italy, so I'm doing an Italian version as well. That my website, gvonstoddard.com, it will be there in September, the digital version, and the physical version when it's ready. So that is still going to be available. And if people go to my website, you can also sign up for my newsletter, where I'm posting, some of the colored pages that are coming in, because the colorist I got in this book, he's from Brazil. His name is Guilherme, and we never met each other or knew each other from anybody. But I'll say this about comic books, and I think most people would agree, whether there's an artist or a writer, like, I'm doing the pencils and inks, but man, it really is a team. It's a team thing, this comic book business, and everybody deserves equal credit. Even the editor, the printer, uh, the pledgers, the backers. This isn't just about me. I mean, yes, it's my story, and I'm making the bones of the art, but Guilherme is making these pages like explode, and Sean is editing this book so it's even better than what I wrote. So that is one thing I love about comic books, and this medium is, it's such an amazing way to feel part of something, a community, a team, hanging out, meeting you. Uh, there's it's a really big sort of yet small universe that feels, I don't know, fulfilling, exciting. I love it.
All right. I appreciate you taking the time to come talk with me.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thank you so much, Cody.
What? You mean you haven't subscribed to Comic Chat Authority? Oh, come on, subscribe already. What are you waiting for? It's no big deal. Like, man, don't forget to tell him to hit that like button. Yeah, that too. Just subscribe.